Have you ever felt paralyzed by a decision that could change everything? Not just confused, but frozen, like your brain short-circuits while time keeps moving forward. You're stuck, second-guessing yourself, replaying worst-case scenarios, while others seem to glide through chaos with clarity. Why do some people make powerful, accurate decisions under pressure, while the rest of us spiral in doubt, fear, and emotional overload? The answer isn't magic. It's not luck. It's philosophy. And not the kind buried in old textbooks or locked in university debates. We're talking about a way of thinking, forged in war, sharpened in adversity, and still alive today, refined by modern thinkers who apply ancient wisdom to modern chaos. As philosopher Massimo Pigliucci puts it, freedom begins when we realize that not everything we feel deserves to be obeyed. This isn't just a quote, it's a key. Because the difference between emotional reaction and rational decision is what separates turmoil from power. In this video, you'll learn a decision-making technique that was born over 2,000 years ago, used by Roman emperors and revived by world-class leaders today. It's not just practical, it's transformative, but listen carefully. The real secret, the one that makes this technique unstoppable, is only revealed in the third chapter. If you miss it, you'll misunderstand the whole method. So stay with me to the end. Welcome to the Stoic Lighthouse, where ancient wisdom meets modern clarity. Let the light of reason guide you through the storm. If you value deep thinking, calm under pressure, and living with intention, then like this video now and subscribe to the channel. One decision could shift how you face everything, and maybe that decision starts right here. Number 1. The mental chaos of the modern age. Imagine trying to navigate a complex decision inside a room filled with flashing lights, competing voices, and walls that echo every possible fear. This isn't fiction. This is the daily reality for most modern minds. We live in an age of relentless noise, an age where attention is currency and your mind is under constant siege. Every app, message, headline, and alert claws at your focus. You wake up with a screen, fall asleep with a screen, and in between, your brain rarely finds silence. It's no wonder so many feel lost, disconnected, chronically reactive. We confuse speed with clarity, movement with progress, and information with wisdom. But here's the truth. You can't think deeply in a state of mental pollution, and in this storm of stimulation, decisions made too fast are often dead wrong. According to Heraclitus, the ancient Greek philosopher who deeply influenced Stoic thought, all things flow. Nothing remains. You never step into the same river twice. Heraclitus saw the world not as fixed, but as a process, fluid, unstable, always shifting. To survive this river of constant change, he believed you had to anchor yourself, not to circumstances, but to inner clarity. And clarity doesn't come from reacting faster, it comes from thinking slower. Plato, centuries before the Stoics, described the soul as a charioteer pulled by three forces: rational thought, emotional impulse, and raw desire. If the rational mind loses grip on the reins, the chariot veers off course into chaos. And it's exactly this internal disarray that we're witnessing today. People aren't just overwhelmed, they're mentally disorganized. Most are not thinking, they're absorbing, not deciding, but reacting. They live on autopilot, outsourcing judgment to trends, groupthink, and digital dopamine. That's why Chrysippus, one of the greatest Stoic minds and the true architect of Stoic logic, emphasized mental discipline as a daily training. Not something you apply only in moments of crisis, but something you build long before the storm. And yet, we often wait until we're drowning in confusion before trying to sort our thoughts. We treat clarity like a rescue boat instead of a foundation. Ryan Holiday, one of today's leading interpreters of Stoicism, echoes this ancient lesson. Clarity comes not when you react, but when you reflect. Reflection requires space, deliberate pause, and the humility to admit that rushing through a problem is rarely the path to truth. We've been tricked into believing that faster is smarter, that multitasking is mastery, but the greatest decisions in history by leaders, scientists, generals were forged in quiet, focused thought, not in chaotic motion. The modern mind must be trained not to consume more, but to process less, to filter, to simplify, to retreat inward before stepping forward. This is why the first Stoic discipline isn't action, it's attention, and through attention comes intention, and with intention, clarity. Mental chaos isn't just a byproduct of the times, it's a symptom of untrained minds. But the Stoic path offers an antidote. Silence, structure, self-command. You don't need to escape the noise of the world. You need to learn how to keep it from entering you, because while we can't control the world's chaos, we can absolutely choose not to carry it in our heads. Number 2, the emotional trap of decision-making. Think back to a time when you had to make an important decision, but your heart was racing, your thoughts tangled, and your breath shallow. In that moment, what felt urgent probably wasn't clear. What felt right might have been wrong. This is the emotional trap. It strikes when your nervous system hijacks your reasoning, and your choices become hostages of your mood. Anger, fear, envy, excitement. These are powerful forces, but left unexamined, they distort reality, magnify risks, and lead us straight into regret. The Stoics never preached the suppression of emotion, they taught mastery over it. And that difference is everything. Musonius Rufus, a teacher of Stoicism and one of the most practical minds of the Roman era, observed, "The highest sign of wisdom is not how much you know, but how calmly you respond to hardship." In our world of instant reactions, staying calm is almost radical. You're expected to post quickly, reply instantly, and decide on the spot. But wisdom doesn't operate on urgency. It requires space and detachment. Plato once described the emotional mind as one of the wild horses pulling the soul's chariot. Without control, it charges forward, dragging the rational mind behind it. And so the Stoics taught not to destroy the horse, but to learn how to hold the reins. Heraclitus, the pre-Stoic philosopher whose ideas echo through centuries, warned, "The best way to defend yourself from evil is to not become it." In other words, if we respond to injustice with rage, to pain with panic, or to fear with recklessness, we become the very things we're trying to overcome. We give away our agency to emotions we never chose. That's why William B. Irvine, another respected voice in modern Stoicism, advises, if we can identify our emotional patterns, we can break their power. This is not about silencing what you feel. It's about elevating what you feel through thought, transforming raw impulse into refined decision. The ancient Stoics practiced this through constant observation. They watched their internal states like a soldier scans the horizon, because the true battle wasn't out there, it was inside. Tim Ferriss, applying Stoic ideas in the high-stress world of entrepreneurship, affirms, define your fears instead of your goals, and you'll unlock your power. The moment you realize your emotions aren't commands, just signals, you gain control. You become less reactive, more reflective, more dangerous, in the best way. To decide under pressure like a Stoic is to pause, observe, and choose, not based on what burns inside you, but on what grounds you, because while emotion screams, reason whispers, and in that quiet voice lives your power. Number 3, the Stoic technique revealed, Premeditatio Malorum. There is a practice so ancient yet so relevant that it has survived emperors, fallen empires, wars, and revolutions. It is not just a technique, it is a mental discipline, a way to prepare the soul for what the world will inevitably throw at you. The Stoics called it Premeditatio Malorum, the premeditation of adversity. At first glance, it may sound grim. Why imagine what could go wrong? Isn't that pessimistic? The modern world says, think positive. The Stoics said, think prepared, because when disaster strikes the untrained mind, it crumbles. But when it strikes the trained mind, it activates. Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism, believed that living in harmony with nature meant accepting that life includes pain, loss, and failure. To ignore this is not optimism, it's delusion. So instead of fearing the unexpected, the Stoics rehearsed it. They imagined loss, injury, betrayal, and even death, not to suffer twice, but to suffer less, to strip fear of its surprise, to make the unpredictable feel familiar. Zeno of Elea, another pre-Socratic thinker, offered this reflection: reality is not what appears in motion, but what endures when appearances shift. This impermanence is not a threat, it's an invitation to meet change, not with panic, but with poise. Premeditatio Malorum is the art of mental armor. You don't wait for life to attack before building your defenses. You build them now, by visualizing worst-case scenarios and calmly asking yourself, what would I do if this happened? What would remain within my control? Pierre Hadot, one of the most respected modern scholars of Stoicism, viewed this as more than a thought experiment. He called it a spiritual exercise, designed to anchor your mind in reality and train you to remain unshaken in a world of shifting ground. The purpose isn't to dwell in fear, it's to dilute fear with logic, to exchange anxiety for strategy. And as Massimo Pigliucci reminds us, anticipating difficulty does not make you paranoid, it makes you realistic. And realism is a form of courage. Even modern high performers unknowingly echo this principle. When Navy SEALs visualize every detail of a mission before stepping onto the battlefield, when elite athletes mentally rehearse a mistake and how they'll recover from it, when a surgeon prepares for everything that could go wrong before entering the OR, they are practicing premeditatio malorum, whether they call it that or not. Socrates, centuries before the Stoics, embodied this resilience. He reflected daily on death, not morbidly, but to liberate his choices from the fear of loss. By accepting the worst, he lived his best. This practice isn't about becoming numb, it's about becoming clear. When you anticipate adversity, you become the calm in the storm. When you prepare for failure, you lower its impact and raise your response. You don't shrink in fear, you expand in foresight. Premeditatio Malorum is not suffering in advance, it is strength in advance. And in a world obsessed with comfort, this ancient discipline might be the most radical act of mental freedom there is. Number 4. High-stakes decisions. What billionaires do differently. What do a Roman philosopher emperor and a modern billionaire CEO have in common? At first glance, almost nothing. One ruled a collapsing empire, the other scaled a digital kingdom. But look closer, and you'll find a shared principle. Their lives were built not on luck or talent alone, but on the power to decide clearly when it mattered most. In high-stakes environments, where every choice can ripple across millions of lives or dollars, decisions can't be left to guesswork. They must be intentional, calculated, almost rehearsed. That's why the most successful minds don't just act, they pre-act. They simulate the storm before it hits. They forecast regret, not to wallow in fear, but to make clarity non-negotiable. Jeff Bezos, founder of Amazon, uses what he calls the regret minimization framework. He asks himself, when I'm 80 years old, will I regret not doing this? This is not just business logic, it's modern stoicism in disguise. Bezos isn't chasing ease, he's confronting the emotional weight of future inaction. It's a digital age spin on premeditatio malorum, a rational rehearsal of what might go wrong if you don't act, or if you act too late, or if fear wins. Pierre Hadot once wrote that the Stoics viewed philosophy not as theory, but as a practice for life. a mental training ground where decisions are shaped before they're needed. And in that same spirit, Michel de Montaigne, the Renaissance writer who rediscovered Stoicism for a new generation, warned, "The greatest error is to fear what has not yet happened." Billionaires, elite performers, and strategic thinkers share this mindset. They don't avoid risk, they engineer resilience, they expect friction, they game plan failure, not because they're negative, but because they're prepared. Warren Buffett, one of the most disciplined investors of all time, avoids making big decisions when emotions are high. He waits. He lets the emotional dust settle before letting logic speak. This echoes the wisdom of Baruch Spinoza, who taught, "Freedom is not the absence of emotions, but mastery over them." And today, thinkers like Tim Ferriss, a student of Stoicism in modern skin, use a version of fear setting inspired directly by Premeditatio Malorum. Ferriss maps out the worst-case scenario, dissects the damage, and then challenges its power over him. His logic: if you can clearly define your fear, it becomes less intimidating. If you ignore it, it owns you. As Ryan Holiday puts it, training the mind for the worst isn't pessimism, it's strategy, it's power. That's what separates reactive people from strategic leaders. The leader feels fear, but doesn't feed it. They use it as a compass, not a cage. So what do billionaires do differently? They don't wait for pressure to teach them. They train for pressure before it comes. And while you may not run a global empire or manage a billion-dollar portfolio, your decisions still carry weight. A career shift, a relationship move, a boundary drawn or broken. In those moments, the Stoic mindset is your greatest asset, because while many make decisions in the heat of the moment, the wise rehearse in the cold of reason. Number 5. How to apply this to your life. Today, philosophy without action is just mental decoration. It sounds impressive, but it changes nothing. And Stoicism was never meant for ivory towers or lecture halls. It was forged in battle, practiced in exile, and lived under fire. So how do you make Premeditatio Malorum more than a concept? How do you turn it into a weapon you can actually carry through your daily life? Start here. Step 1. Identify the decision in front of you. Big or small, it doesn't matter. It could be switching careers, leaving a toxic relationship, making an investment, setting a boundary, or even saying no to a demand that drains you. Don't judge the scale. What matters is its weight on your mind. Step 2. Write out everything that could go wrong. Seriously, get it all out. Not just the surface stuff like, "it might not work," or "I could fail." Dig deeper. What's the fear behind the fear? Is it embarrassment, rejection, financial instability, judgment? Step 3. For every worst-case scenario, write a counter-response. What would you do if that thing happened? How could you minimize the damage? What do you already have within your control that you're ignoring? This is not fantasy. It's clarity. And clarity shrinks fear, because what's seen clearly loses its power to control you. Zeno of Citium, founder of Stoicism, believed that virtue meant living in accordance with reason, and reason requires rehearsal, mental discipline, preparation for impact. The great mathematician and mystic Pythagoras, though not a Stoic himself, once advised reviewing your actions every night before sleep. The modern Stoic updates that: don't just reflect after, rehearse before. William B. Irvine, modern Stoic author of A Guide to the Good Life, suggests the best time to prepare for adversity is before it arrives. Training your mind early is a Stoic superpower. You don't need to build a complicated ritual. Just stop running from what scares you and start walking toward it with a pen in your hand. Do this when deciding where to live. Do it before hitting send on that emotional message. Do it when facing temptation to quit, to lash out, to settle. Because courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision to walk through fear with your eyes open and your mind steady. And every time you practice this, even briefly, you shift something inside you. You slow your reaction. You strengthen your response. You begin to lead your thoughts instead of being led by them. As that inner training grows, something else happens. Panic starts to whisper instead of shout, and reason begins to lead the way. Number 6. The real power of deciding like a Stoic. To decide is not just to choose between option A and option B. To decide is to declare who you are. It's to draw a quiet line in the sand between who you've been and who you intend to become. And every decision, whether silent or spoken, is a mirror of your internal order or your internal chaos. In Stoicism, this is sacred, because the act of deciding, calmly, clearly, intentionally, is the mark of a free mind. And in a world where most people live on autopilot, reactive and emotional, the power to decide with intention is revolutionary. Chrysippus, the systematizer of Stoic logic and ethics, taught that reason is the core of virtue. And without reason, there can be no wisdom, no courage, no justice, no self-control. When you choose based on emotion, you're not deciding, you're surrendering. But when you engage the full power of your rational mind, you're shaping not just outcomes, but identity. Diogenes of Sinope, though more aligned with cynicism than Stoicism, lived this principle with brutal clarity. He owned nothing, feared no one, and rejected the need to impress anyone. For some, he was mad. But to the Stoics, he embodied radical freedom, the kind that only comes from total independence of thought. As Heraclitus once said, "Character is destiny." Every decision you make, especially when no one is watching, carves your character deeper. And over time, your character becomes your compass, not just for what to choose, but for how to stand when things fall apart. Baruch Spinoza, the 17th century philosopher who expanded on Stoic ideas with surgical precision, believed that real freedom is not doing whatever you want. It's wanting what is rational, acting not from fleeting emotions, but from a clear understanding of reality. He wrote, "The free person thinks least of death, and his wisdom is a meditation on life." That's not just poetic, it's powerful. Because when your mind is ordered, you don't just make better decisions, you live better. You stop chasing validation, you stop fearing discomfort, and you start choosing the path aligned with your deepest values, not your shallowest urges. Massimo Pigliucci affirms, "Living well doesn't mean getting everything right. It means living in accordance with your principles, even under pressure." To decide like a Stoic is not to be perfect. It's to be anchored. It's to say, even if I lose, even if I suffer, even if others betray me, I will still choose clarity. I will still choose integrity, because that is who I am. Michel de Montaigne, the Renaissance thinker who rediscovered Stoicism for his generation, captured it beautifully when he wrote, "The greatest triumph of the human mind is not being disturbed by what lies beyond its control." That's the core of Stoic decision-making. You don't chase what's outside you, you cultivate what's within you. You don't try to bend the world, you shape how you stand within it. And as Aristotle, who deeply influenced early Stoic logic, once taught, virtue lives in balance, not in reckless impulse, and not in passive fear, but in the deliberate middle, where courage and wisdom meet. So when you decide like a Stoic, you're not just solving problems, you're building a life, one decision at a time, not loud, not dramatic, but unshakably grounded. And in a world of noise, that kind of quiet power, that's what makes a mind truly dangerous in the best way possible. You've just discovered a method that's been battle-tested by warriors, philosophers, emperors, and modern high performers. It's simple, it's timeless, and if you apply it, it will change the way you face every challenge. Premeditatio Malorum isn't about pessimism, it's about readiness. It's about stripping away the illusions of comfort and facing life with eyes wide open. Whether you're navigating a crisis, preparing for a leap of faith, or simply trying to make better daily choices, this Stoic mindset puts the power back in your hands. Chrysippus taught that our judgments are more dangerous than our circumstances, because what harms us most isn't the event, it's how we interpret it. Naval Ravikant, entrepreneur and modern Stoic voice, puts it this way: clear thinking leads to calm living. You don't control events, but you control your response. This is the art of rational courage, and every time you choose preparation over panic, reflection over reaction, you don't just survive the world, you lead yourself through it. But now, I want to hear from you. What decision are you facing right now that requires clarity? Drop it in the comments. Let's build a space for reflection, support, and growth. This channel isn't about shouting solutions, it's about lighting the path. And if this video gave you value, if it sparked even one moment of insight, then hit the like button right now. Share it with someone who's facing a difficult choice. And make sure you're subscribed to the Stoic Lighthouse, where ancient wisdom meets modern clarity. Every week we help you train your mind like a Stoic, so you can lead with reason and live with strength. Now, before you go, here's something important. In our next video, we'll explore a truth most people never want to hear. But once you see it, you can never unsee it. It's titled, Revealed the Brutal Truth About Stoicism. You own nothing, and that's your power. This one will challenge your comfort zone. It might sting, but it will set you free. Until then, stay anchored, stay alert, and remember the words of Plato. The greatest victory is to conquer yourself. See you in the next video.